This is KLEAN Radio.
Welcome, everybody out there listening to KLEAN Radio. I'd like to tell everybody right away, go to facebook.com/KLEAN Radio. Our hashtag tonight is Does Rehab Work? Also, go to KLEANradio.com and read my latest blog and let us know what you think. In studio tonight, and for a couple seconds until Andrew gets here, is Buddy Totten. And Buddy, one of the things, welcome to, always Buddy. And one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about tonight is, does rehab work? And by the age of 22, I was in 6 rehabs. And I would always walk around telling people rehab didn't work. It was right. Lame. It just wasn't it. But the truth is, I never actually did anything while I was in the rehab,
right,
other than go there for, the meals and, wait till the heat was off.
They just housed you. They just housed you.
They just housed me. And,
right.
And essentially, as I was able to, after I got sober and I was able to look back on it, rehab, even though it didn't work at that point, it saved my life.
Right.
Because it kept me off the streets and it kept me sane enough until I was eventually able to get sober.
Exactly.
So there are many myths about rehab, and I would love to hear from you tonight what you think some of the myths are. We're going to share some of the myths with you, but I also asked the question, does rehab work? And I would love your opinion on that, so give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. And the question is, does rehab work? And Buddy, did you go through rehab?
I did twice, yes.
And how did that work out?
Well, the first time I went, I didn't want to be there. I was there for other people. I was there for the wrong reasons. I was there for my family, and I wasn't there for myself. So it wasn't that, and I didn't understand at the time. All rehab could do was provide me the resources, so that I could help myself. But I didn't want to help myself. And that's why I had to go back multiple times, But what rehab did for me, it did work. It absolutely worked. First, it broke my active addiction. It broke that cycle, even though I did eventually relapse. But it planted the seed. It planted the seed of recovery, so I knew where to go. Once I became willing, I knew exactly who to call and where to go and what to do to get clean.
And it actually, it's a very bizarre thing. When people are diagnosed with cancer, when people are diagnosed with diabetes, it doesn't always, the chemo doesn't always work.
Right.
But you don't hear people walking around afterwards going, chemo's, well, you sometimes do. You hear people saying chemo's bad, but
right.
It's a very specific thing, because I think sometimes when people get sober, we get sober and we don't come out and say it's great. The voices of dissent, the voices of the people that it didn't work for sometimes are louder than for the people that it actually worked for.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the thing is that everybody wants to view things as a series of events. And recovery, my experience, is not like that. Recovery is a process. So what it did is that it didn't work right away, in the sense that I didn't graduate from rehab and then all of a sudden I was cured. That's not the way it works. It
doesn't work right?
No, it doesn't work that way. I thought it was going to work that way, and a lot of other people do, but it doesn't. It's a process.
It's not a magic pill.
It's not a magic pill. It's a process, and once the seed of recovery is planted within you, then the process has begun.
And if you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio, so give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Hashtag tonight is, does rehab work? We're discussing some of the myths of rehab. Last week, it was a whole thing with Rob Ford, the former mayor, or the current mayor in Canada. Right. And one of the things in Toronto, one of the things he said is he compared rehab to, it's like football camp. And I've never actually been to football camp, so I don't really get. And I think it's a very scary thing. And I was, it is rehab. I don't like when people talk about this stuff always afterwards, but he got kicked out, or he was considered disruptive, and he had all these issues. And I don't really get it's football,
I don't get it.
Yeah. Because it's really not. It's sort of the opposite. We don't want to, this isn't boot camp. This isn't, rehab's not, it shouldn't be drill camp. It should be a place you're learning, a place you're growing. And, it might not work out right away, but.
Right. Exactly. And, it's natural to be rebellious and be reluctant in the beginning. I mean, addicts and alcoholics are notoriously irritable and discontent, and we're rebellious people. We like to push boundaries and we like to push the system. But and those are the people that are often, that once they decide that they're going to get clean, because they've really struggled with the whole concept of it, that they're the ones that really go the extra mile and do the work. So you never know who's going to stay clean.
And again, if you just tuned in, you're listening to Clean Radio. Our hashtag tonight is Does Rehab Work? Let's go to Barn, calling from Edmonds, Washington. Welcome to Clean Radio.
Hi.
How's it going?
I'm great. I like your topic.
Okay.
I went to rehab 34 years ago.
Right.
And I went to U.S. Naval Hospital in Long Beach, California. And I don't know if you know this or not, but the Armed Forces do maintain some of the best rehab facilities in the country. I went there as a young man. I didn't stay sober for very long after I got out, but within a month of testing out using and drinking again,
right,
I knew exactly what to do
right.
to get off the crazy train.
There you go.
It almost gave you sober feet.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
Your feet didn't know which way exactly to go, but you started.
Well, I pretty much did know where to go.
Yeah.
When I wanted to help and figured out that I didn't want to live like a drunk all my life, and I've been sober 33 years.
Awesome.
That's
Congratulations.
amazing. And thank you for your service, because obviously you served our country and you were able to, one of the things we talk a lot about, on this show is there are a lot of troops now that are coming back with a lot of issues.
I managed to stay sober for 30 years and 1 month on active duty. I can't say enough about how at least the Armed Forces work the rehab facilities. It was a little bit like boot camp, but that was just the nature of that beast.
Yes,
sure.
And I don't think Rob Ford went to the Naval Academy Treatment Center.
No, it was a Long Beach Naval Hospital. But
one of the things actually, and I like that you're talking about this, because one of the things I spoke about in Buddy too, was that we had both been in treatment and it didn't work, but it gave us that direction that when we finally needed it, it saved our lives till we were able to finally.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, the thing for me was that rehab works. It does work. I was the one that was unwilling. I was the one that did not use the resources that were being handed to me. And once I decided that, you know what, I am going to do this, then it all opened up for me. And then all those skills that they were trying to teach me while I was in treatment came into play and saved my life. So I would say in the long run, it absolutely did work.
They certainly hand you this huge sack of tools to use when you want to use them. And I just remember those fellas in there telling me, well, if anything, this will really ruin your...
Yeah, it'll ruin your drinking. The old adage, right?
That's for sure.
So, Barn, are you on Facebook?
Yeah, I sure am.
If you could go to facebook.com/Clean Radio, like us, private message us. I want to send you some swag out there.
There you go.
And just share the message why rehab works.
Hey, absolutely. And I just tuned in your show for the first time.
And it's love at first listen, Barn.
Hey, good stuff.
Yeah,
awesome.
Thank you so much.
All right, good luck, guys.
And that's
right,
Barn. We're on every Sunday night, so give us a call back anytime.
Okay.
Thank you. And that was Barn calling from Edmonds, Washington. If you just tuned in, you are listening to Clean Radio. Our topic tonight is it's our hashtag tonight is Does Rehab Work? Go to facebook.com/Clean Radio at Clean Radio on Twitter. Let us know what you think, because there are so many myths out there. Does rehab work? And joining us via satellite dish somewhere far, far, far away is Andrew Spanswick.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good.
And that's Buddy Totten, and this is Andrew Spanswick. Andrew, so we're discussing tonight, obviously, does rehab work?
Yes, very important topic.
Yes, it really is an extremely important topic.
Yeah, it's, I think a lot of people have myths about rehab and rehab versus, AA and whether or not, people can just do things themselves and when it's important to go to treatment versus just trying to get help on your own. And a lot of people just don't know what rehab is. They think it's that weird thing they see on TV that celebrities go to every time they're trying to get out of trouble.
You mean it's not?
Yeah.
I thought that's what rehab was.
I did too.
Some of them, I suppose, are.
But, but the problem, and it's a great point, Andrew, that you're bringing up, because so many people have watched those certain shows, and they see not only it not working during, but they also see the after. And it's almost like they get a double argument. It just doesn't work. They're coddled. They're all this stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I think especially for people that are wealthy, it's very difficult to get good treatment. A lot of the things that wealthy people are able to get away with, other people aren't. And so they either get a lot of coddling, a lot of just trying to keep them there when they've got so many other people trying to pull them out. It's harder for them to actually have someone they can trust and listen to or give themselves over to the process. They have so many resources to get out. And, when you put stuff like that on TV or you see news reports about it on TV, you don't really see that part of it. You don't see the people that are really trying that don't have those ways to get away. And then they actually get through some of the process and they have better outcomes.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. Tonight our topic is, does rehab work? That's our hashtag. And some of the myths, because there are so many myths out there about rehab, and so many myths about treatment. Give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Andrew, one of the myths, I think often, and we're very careful about this, is, that you could do it by yourself. And some people can. But it could be very dangerous.
A big part of that is what are you addicted to? And there's a lot of ways that if you're not too addicted, or if you switch addictions from one chemical to another, sometimes it's manageable. But there's a lot of addictions like alcoholism, for even. Right. If you're drinking a certain amount, there's people that drink a whole bottle of vodka. And for them just to stop is extremely dangerous.
Explain what a little bit, because I don't think people understand that enough.
Right. Well, your body actually becomes tolerant to the substance and actually needs that substance to function. That's why you have what's called, DT. You get DTs, you get withdrawal from alcohol.
Or the spiders in the head, some people call it.
Yeah, your body starts shaking, you throw up a lot. So the body's an incredible thing in that it can actually adapt to a steady dose of a certain toxin and become self-regulated with that toxin. And when you take it out, and you cut it off, the body actually freaks out and doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know how to function without it because it's already worked its way into functioning with it. So at that point, you actually need to medically detox or have at least a residentially supervised detox where a doctor's coming in and gradually tapers you off certain medications so that you don't have withdrawal. And a lot of people that just stop cold turkey actually end up dying. And we've seen that most recently, I guess, talking about celebrities, so obviously our girl who didn't go to rehab had that problem, Amy Winehouse.
Right.
And she actually died from stopping drinking. And that happens. And the other thing we see with that is narcotics as well. And a lot of the old ways of people self-inducing detox, if you watch a movie like Train Spotting, they talk about how to kick dope and what you need to get through and all this kind of thing. A lot of people just don't make it through those rough detoxes. And I even argue that the detoxes of old, where they felt like it was important for patients to feel uncomfortable all the way to detox.
Them.
Yeah, it was, well, I don't know. Part of it I think was punishment. Part of it was I think people were trained and they didn't know any different.
Right.
The mythology of the day was that the client actually had to feel the detox, otherwise they would be too easily encouraged to go back on opiates again.
Right, because committing suicide, essentially, shooting a needle in their arm every day wasn't...
Yeah, that wasn't punishment enough.
That wasn't punishment. Right, sleeping under a bridge, nah. Let's make them really shake after they want to stop. But, Andrew, let's get to a call. We got Jefferson calling from Seattle. Welcome to KLEAN Radio, Jefferson.
Oh, hey there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we could hear you, Jefferson.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just thought I'd share my experience. I lived in South Florida in 1975. I was 20 years old, and I had gotten pretty deep into alcohol and drugs. By the time I was 20, I got confronted by some people from Minneapolis. And I got on a plane and went to a treatment center where I lived for 6 months. kind of a residential house, old style treatment. Some of it was a little bit tough, a little shaming, but basically very AA based. And I feel totally blessed because, of course, I got out at 6 months and went right to a halfway house, and I've been sober for 39 years, and I'm just...
That's amazing.
It is.
That's amazing. In those days, by God, you were probably the youngest person in the room by 40 years.
Well, there were a lot of young people, though, that, bopped in and out from the criminal justice, I think, and, then died later. And I think it was partly because I had left far from home. And there was a great book that I still love, and if you ever want to dig it up, it's called I'll Quit Tomorrow by Vern Johnson.
Andrew's very familiar with that book.
Yeah, it's it's old school, but it's just still very solid stuff. But I just spent some time during those 39 years basically working 1 and 12 and came very close to, getting drunk. And so I'm back heavy into going to meetings.
And one of the things, honestly, Jefferson, one of the things, just sometimes, we talk about this a lot, Andrew, is sometimes group therapy, outpatient.
Yeah,
even when you're sober, it could be...
I think it's really interesting, this story, because here's someone, who got sober a long time ago when what we knew about addiction was fairly limited. And we've come a long way since then, and treatment has come a long way since then. Rehabs, for the most part, have come a long way since then. There's still a lot that go off what we call the Minnesota model, which is basically what you're talking about, a 12-step based model. But a lot of rehabs now have realized that science and medicine have given us, and different types of therapeutic approaches have given us a whole array of ways to work with and treat with people that are more sophisticated than that. That doesn't mean that the past is wrong completely or that it didn't work for millions of people. But what it does mean is that we can use a lot of that in conjunction with a lot of new stuff.
And grow.
And we can grow.
Yeah.
And I think that like science and anything is progressive of science and movement and growth. Why would we want to just stay with something that only helped a small minority of people? And then also, I think we've come to the realization that alcoholism and addiction is not a one-off treatment thing. We've realized that we really have to be engaged with our friends and our patients and our clients.
Yeah.
We have to be engaged with them long term. This is not something where
it's not one and done.
Go to rehab.
There's no magic bullet.
It's done. And 30, 40 years later, I hope that a lot of our clients are still coming to our alumni barbecue. And
it's because I'm such a great cook.
Exactly.
But Jefferson, I got to tell you, it's absolutely amazing, because it's so. It's one of the few that you hear that say, I went to rehab and I got sober and I stayed.
I just took it. I took it and I believed it. And of course, I've always loved music, and I started enjoying music more and enjoying life. And I just, I feel blessed. I will say a myth that I know I'm wrong in some ways about this, but I think it's a myth that physical addiction is such a big deal. And I have to say quickly that...
What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is that I think the psychological withdrawal causes psychosomatic symptoms sometimes that aren't cellular in your body. But I do know that
you're absolutely right. There's no doubt about that. And the most glaring example of that is tobacco, nicotine.
Yeah.
Right? It only takes 3 hours to get nicotine out of your system. But how many people do you see that are just freaking the hell out? 5, 6, 7, or even a month later when they apply a little stress.
Or a week before thinking about quitting.
Yeah. You guys, thanks so much.
Jefferson, thank you so much for the call. Call us back anytime.
Okay, good.
Thank you. And if you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. That was Jefferson calling from Seattle, Washington. The guy's got 39 years sober, went to a rehab 39 years ago.
Wow.
And it worked. And rehab does work. And, that's the voices I want to hear tonight. If you had a problem, I want to hear that too. But I want to hear, because we're not always the loud ones. Sometimes the people that rehab work for, like Andrew said, the millions of people that rehab has worked for, I want to hear from you. Give us a call. The number's 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. One of my favorite things that Andrew talks about is the 7-year process, Andrew.
Yeah, I think from the time of the onset of addiction to the time that people actually realize they want to get help, is on average about 7 years. So we've got a lot of people out there that are suffering, and they might be in year 4 or 5, and things are starting to wear down, and then they realize, oh, actually, you know what, I do need to get some help. And it really bothers me that it takes so long for people to get ready. You know, that they have to get to the point where
almost death.
And I think that's one of the big myths. One of the big myths is that you have to bottom out before you get help. That you actually have to become fully addicted to something before you get help. You know, if you're shooting up heroin or smoking heroin, but you're doing it recreationally and you're not physically addicted yet, which, by the way, doesn't take very long to get physically addicted to, but you can do it. I mean, you could theoretically recreationally smoke heroin, but, you know, is that healthy? Is that the right thing to be doing? Why is someone engaging in something that's that self-destructive at that level?
You know, it's interesting what you just brought up, Andrew, is the bottom, right? Because I don't think people understand it enough, because and I've had many discussions with this, right? We know people that can never hit a financial bottom, right? They have so much money. They're never going to hit Skid Row, yet they can hit their own bottom.
Yep.
And there's got to be a different, something's got to change with that, because you're right. Not everybody has to lose everything. Some people can't.
And a lot of people don't. Look, there's a lot of people that are addicted for a long, long time, and they suffer for it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they die from it. You know, the idea that everybody's going to die from their addiction directly is not necessarily true. In fact, more people probably die from accidents because they're intoxicated than actually probably die directly from their addiction, other than tobacco smoking, which kills 1 out of every 2 people that smoke.
And let me ask you this question. Do you have to want treatment for it to be effective?
I don't think so. I think a lot of people are forced into treatment, and they actually get a break from what they've been doing themselves, and a few people come out of that, or at least their eyes are open to the possibility of what could happen if they, continue down a path of sobriety instead of continue down a path of using. And a lot of those people may go out and test it again, and maybe go out, or maybe they'll keep using drugs for a while. But when someone sort of has it's stuck in their head that what they're doing is killing themselves,
right?
They actually, the denial of their addiction sort of gets cut off a little bit, and so it starts sneaking into having a good time. And then when they feel really bad after using, and really, just a mess, all those messages come in, and like, oh, this is really why I should be getting help. Not because of the one time that I've actually fixed myself temporarily with some sort of substance, if that even worked, but at least let them ignore things, And
the biggest thing I think, as we're going to break that, Andrew, we could spread, is that it's okay to come back.
Yeah, I think, I hate to be so casual about it and cavalier about it, because I'm not, but I think I'm accepting of the fact that I can't make a client or a patient want to get better on my own.
I don't think it's being cavalier. I think it's love. Right. And it's acceptance, and it's knowing. And you know how many people out there need to hear that it's okay to come back if you're out, because that's going to save more people's lives rather than the dogma.
I also think it's really good to give it a try. I mean, what do you got to lose?
That's exactly right. And we're going to discuss more myths from treatment when we come back from the break. If you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. Hashtag tonight is, does rehab work? And we think it does. Also, what are some of the myths? And Buddy Totten, Andrew Spanswick's on satellite somewhere far, far in the regions of the world. We'll be back.
Are you or someone you care about addicted to drugs or alcohol? Addiction ruins lives and destroys families. Bring an end to the pain and suffering by calling KLEAN Treatment Centers. KLEAN has helped people from around the world break free by not only treating the addiction, but the underlying causes, and providing vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean, with no gimmicks and no false promises. If you need immediate assistance or just have questions, call KLEAN Treatment Centers for guidance. A much better life awaits.
Welcome everybody back out there. You're listening to KLEAN Radio, and in studio tonight, the whole show has been Buddy Totten, and on a satellite far, 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 far from away is Andrew Spanswick.
I'm sure I'm going through the satellite.
Just sounds like so get smarty. Anyways, our show tonight is about the myths of rehab, and does rehab work? And we say it does. Buddy, we posted that online, and what do people say?
Well, basically, that you're cured of your addiction once you go. And that
that's the myth.
That's the myth.
Okay.
That's the myth. Yeah, so that's that, and then somebody wrote that you'll find your husband or wife there. That was pretty funny. And
it happens.
It happens. Yeah,
if that's what gets you to rehab, that you might get married, go.
Basically, overwhelming when everybody's posting
50% of the time.
Yeah,
right.
It's funny. Go on.
The myth that you're cured, that rehab is a cure-all, and that is going to cure you of your addiction.
And Andrew, where do you think that myth started? Because nobody, like, they get diagnosed with cancer. Nobody starts on their chemo treatment and says, you know, that's it. You're cured.
Right. And even the term remission is sort of not understood. When people go into remission from cancer, that doesn't mean that they've cured the cancer. It just means the cancer stopped growing or is getting a little bit smaller.
Right.
So, I think that there's a lot of different illnesses we can talk about, and people talk about often about diabetes and things like that are chronic long-term diseases. And the symptoms from drug abuse and alcoholism can be reversed largely if you stop. But that doesn't mean that you still don't have a change in your brain chemistry to some degree, or a change in your behavior, which you've manifested into yourself is still being set up to use other outside drugs or alcohol or even processes now like gambling to try and avoid your pain or whatever what's going on in your mind. And some people really aren't in that much pain, but they have something that's going on in their subconscious that's driving them to want to not deal with regular life and deal with life in a way that they're escaping into some other sort of realm. And a lot of this is hard to explain. A lot of people that have these problems won't find out even why they were using until they stop, and then sometimes they take many years to look back at the behavior until you figure out maybe why you started in the first place.
And if you just tuned in, you're listening to KLEAN Radio. Let's get to Heather, who hasn't called in a while. Heather, welcome back as always to KLEAN Radio.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I had two things. One, just on the topic, I think that rehab can work, but it also sort of depends on the quality of the program and the length. A lot of times people, I don't know if it's a myth, but sometimes people go for like 3 to 5 days and do a spin dry where they don't really,
Heather with the line of the night. That's funny, Heather.
Hashtag spin dry.
Yeah.
Yeah, your mind has to be able to be clear a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I have been doing pretty well.
Andrew, one second, Heather, because it's a great point, and I want Andrew to touch on that a little bit.
Okay.
Because, rehab we wish people had the ability to stay long. Andrew, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's two things going on there. One is that some people can't afford it and or don't have insurance that will pay for it. And that's a problem. And, we've cut back our mental health services dramatically since the 1950s. Part of that is because medications have gotten better, but part of it also is just federal and state policy of not wanting to pay for mental health care. Some of that is starting to get reversed with legislation. Some of it is still not changed, and there's a huge need for reform. The other thing, though, is that a lot of people they'll come in for the wrong reason, and you're right. Like the spin dry thing is a perfect metaphor for it. They just want to get to the point where they feel like, oh, you know what? I'm actually feeling good enough to go out and do drugs again.
Right.
They actually were feeling really, really sick, and somehow they come in, they get detoxed, and then all the problems for which they're using start coming up, and that gets more uncomfortable than they felt addicted. But because they got detoxed, now they feel healthy enough that the mental portion, the psychological drives that were pushing the addiction, really take hold, and they feel well enough to actually go out and use again. And unfortunately, that's when we see the most overdoses. People that come in for a quick detox and tend to go out are the most likely to overdose.
And explain why.
Well, one, they lose a lot of their tolerance. But two, all of a sudden, I think it's psychologically, it's not a good place to be, because on some level you realize that you're on a self-destructive path, and as soon as you use again, there's a lot of shame and guilt and failure that tends to hit addicts that they've gotten out, and a lot of people have some hopes for them, and they just go right back to being self-destructive.
And Heather, what's the sorry.
Unfortunately, that's the only coping mechanism they have for dealing with what they really should have been doing by staying longer. And
Heather, what was the second thing you wanted to bring up?
Oh, I was just saying that I'm getting involved with stuff that I did before I got sober, and I know that you've talked, Judah, about how you went to concerts sober, and you're like, oh, yeah. I can do this sober. And I've been going to this camping event, and I just had this kind of experience because some of the people I was camping with were drinking, and, I could be kind of amused by it because that's the way that I used to be. But the next day, when people were hungover and their eyes were bloodshot and all that kind of thing, I'm like, oh, thank God I'm not there.
That's it. I mean, you're right. It's completely right. And it's something, if you just tuned in, by the way, you are listening to Clean Radio. We're on the phone with Heather calling from Vermont, Andrew on a satellite far, far away, and Buddy Totten in studio. So give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. It's 800-222-5222. We're talking about some of the myths about people have about treatment and that rehab does work. But Andrew, Heather brings up a great point, right? And that's just she's starting to have fun. And we talk about the continuum of care sometimes, why it's so important that when rehab ends, you just don't leave.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like education, right? Just because you went to high school doesn't mean that maybe you shouldn't go on to college, or even if you graduate from college and have a job, doesn't mean that you should stop reading books about what you do.
Right. Which is what a lot of people do, actually. That's why we're in a society that's having so many problems.
I mean, I'm always shocked when I go into someone's house who's got a college education, there's not a book in the house.
Right.
And it's like, wow, really? Like, you don't think that maybe things are changing all the time and that people are coming up with new ideas, and it's important to keep questioning stuff and learning more. But a lot of people seem to think that, I have a college education and therefore I'm smart,
Right.
And unfortunately, we have a society that sort of thinks like that. The value on intellectual thought is undervalued. And I think the same thing is true for things like learning more information and working on the idea of getting better.
Heather, we got to have you out here. I mean, Heather, you've been listening to the show for 4 years, and Andrew, we go bowling every Wednesday night. And you got to come bowl with us.
I went once.
You went once, but we're going to have you again. And I like how I say we're going to have you again, Andrew. And but Heather's got to come bowling. You got to figure out a way to get out here, Heather.
Yeah, if I ever am coming to California again, I will, let you know.
Why is that an if? Okay, you went on a camping trip. You could come to California.
Yeah. Well, there's a matter of I only have 2 vacation days left.
Right. Well, that's till next year.
Yeah. I can do long-term planning. There you go. I was jealous. I was like, oh, man, I really wish I could go bowling with them. That would be very
You know what? If you were drinking and there was free alcohol out here, you'd probably make it.
Oh, good point, Andrew. Yeah. That's actually really good. You know what? You're right. I would have. If you would have said free alcohol,
of course you probably wouldn't have the job. So.
That's exactly right too. Heather, thank you so much for the call.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you, Heather. And if you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. Our hashtag tonight is does rehab work? Give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Give us a call because we're talking about the myths of rehab, Andrew. And some of and it's like I started the show saying, the voices of who it doesn't work for are so far greater sometimes than than the millions you talked about that it worked for.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tougher one to deal with. Actually, I'd like your insight on that one, Judah. That's kind of...
Well, here's the thing, and I was talking about this in the beginning of the show, is I got sober when I was 22. I had been in 5 rehabs, and I would walk around going, oh, rehab stinks.
Right.
But what did I do in rehab? I did the spin dry. My insurance was okay, so it kept me there. But as I look back on it now and I look back on it after, rehab kept me alive until I was able to get sober.
Yeah, I mean, it does that, and it can do that. Unfortunately, it doesn't always do that. I mean, we do lose a lot of people to this illness.
That's the hard thing, like you said, but we're talking about this because one of the dangers of relapse is that you could die.
Right, and a lot of people just don't believe that. They don't really believe that people die. I mean, we're sort of set up not really well to deal with death in our culture.
Right.
And so we ignore it. We don't really see it. It happens in hospitals a lot, and then people are buried and we just don't notice it. I mean, we certainly feel an absence, and we have this grieving process. It's even kind of strange relative to other cultures. But, yeah, it's a lot of it's kind of hidden, or it's, happens to some rich person, and they're like, oh, well, why was Michael Jackson a drug addict? I don't believe it. A lot of people won't even believe that other people are addicts.
Right.
Right, because how could they be? How could you be an addict? I mean, that's a myth. Right.
How could somebody with so much talent and be so wealthy, be such a complete drug addict.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I mean, and we know that Michael Jackson was a horrible drug addict. I mean, he's probably one of the worst that we've seen in recent years, in terms of longitude of how long he was an addict, but also the types of drugs he was doing. I mean, he wrote a love song to Demerol. I mean,
Wow.
you know,
Who hasn't?
right? I mean,
And,
you can go to YouTube and look it up. It's amazing. I mean, you know, he was putting it out there, and people still didn't believe it.
Wow.
You know, he was saying it, and people just couldn't accept the fact that someone that talented could still actually have a drug problem.
But one of the things I think that's extremely important, and I want to get back to this because I think it's always important to talk about, because so many people say, why doesn't rehab work, right? And it didn't work because of this. It didn't work because of this. I didn't always do the follow-up. I almost never did the follow-through, right? I'd be my last day of rehab, and they'd say to me, you're going to go to outpatient, right? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'll be there tomorrow. And never went.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, people often ask, you know, what's the success rate of your rehab? And my answer is, well, it always really depends. And it also depends on what you think a success rate should be, or what a success rate is about.
Right. How do you define it? Yeah.
Right. What we can do with someone while they're in rehab is actually pretty impressive. What they take with them, and then what they choose to do after they leave, I don't have control over. I need to do all the clinicians we work with.
Right.
There actually is, to some degree, a large amount of personal responsibility in an addict being involved in their treatment and wanting to get help. So we can get through a lot of it with a client that wants to get help or a patient that wants to get help, but still, you know, there's a lot of responsibility for them, you know, if not getting into rehab, if somehow they get there somehow else. But once they're there and once they leave, you know, they have to be able to recognize that they've relapsed, if they relapse, and then get back into treatment as soon as possible. And that's one of my big pet peeves is that, you know, people go out and they might test themselves again to see whether they're really an addict, and they relapse hard and extensively, and instead of feeling good enough to call the rehab they went to before, they just run and hide.
That was me.
For a long period of time.
That was my story. I was ashamed.
Right.
I had guilt, and I think that's one of the cool things we do. And I'm not just saying this to brag. We're not like that.
No, not at all.
You know, and it's like, you know, one of my
judge.
favorite stories is, you know, because we do bowling, and somebody I had texted and said, are you going to come bowling with us tonight? And he didn't respond. And when he didn't respond, I got a little nervous. And I saw him the next day, and he's doing great now. But he goes to me, you know, I was going to text you back and say, you know, did you want me to, you know, I would have come, but I would have been getting high in the bathroom. And I was like, okay. We're cool with that. Just come so we could see you. And that's
what's cool is he called you the next day.
That's exactly right. And
That says a lot.
Yeah,
and he felt safe enough to do that, which speaks a lot to, you know, how much you work with clients directly and patients directly, and how much they really do trust and believe in your opinion, which is great.
Which is astonishing too. And I couldn't just take the compliment. I had to zing myself. And if you are just, and thank you, Andrew. If you just tuned in, you are listening to KLEAN Radio. Give us a call. The number is 800-222-5222. That's 800-222-5222. Let's go to Brad calling from Wilhelmina, Oregon. Brad?
Yes.
Did I pronounce that correctly? Wilhelmina, Oregon?
Yes, you did.
No, it's Wilhelmina, Oregon.
Huh.
Just outside of Dallas, Oregon.
Wow. Okay. Welcome to KLEAN Radio, Brad. What could you? It says you have an answer for us.
Well, I think I have an answer. I've tried rehab one time for alcohol, and I think a lot of it comes down to having an accountability partner after you actually get out of rehab, and having people follow up with you and actually care. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Without that, I think there's going to be a lot of relapse, and along with health insurance dropping the mental health side of it, you know, it's making it harder for people to actually get into rehab.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and we see a lot more dual diagnosis than I think it's recognized more than it used to be. A lot of rehabs are started by people that are well-intentioned, but really the qualifications for starting a rehab, and that's why I always tell people to really look at the rehab you're going to, because the qualifications for someone that starts a rehab really don't exist. I mean, you can start a rehab with no training whatsoever and then just hire a few licensed professionals. And, you know, but the person who's running the company is making decisions about what type of rehab to run. And rehabs are all not created equal. They all have different ways of doing things. So it's really important to find a rehab that's really started by people that have been in the medical profession and that understand this and have, the right types of doctors involved that are properly trained. And there's a lot of scary rehabs out there. I mean, there's rehabs run by Scientology, and they don't advertise that they're run by Scientology, and people end up going to a Scientology-based rehab. I mean, that's some scary stuff. The people that don't believe in mental illness. And yet we know that the vast majority of people that actually come to our treatment centers have at least some form of mental illness going on, even if it's anxiety and depression. And something as simple, I say, and it's not that simple, but as anxiety or depression at high levels can be extremely inhibitive from people actually getting help and doing well.
Brad, the question I want is, how are you doing now?
I've actually relapsed just because of the accountability part.
So you're in a relapse?
Right now, yes. I work at a mill and I work long hours. I know it's no excuse, but
no, it's.
I can honestly say I do have a drinking problem, and it's hard to actually find a good rehab place, kind of like what you guys were saying about the Scientology and everything like that.
But Brad, can I ask you a question? Do you want to get help?
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
If we said to you, there's a great place right around you in pronounce it, please. Willamina?
Yes.
Oregon? Would you go?
Yeah, no, I'd definitely go. Except I can't find a place close to Willamina. It's
Brad,
kind of out here in the middle of the sticks.
Brad, sometimes the sticks have roses. I don't know. I thought I was trying to come up with something really good to say. Brad, there's a good place around you. Andrew?
I'm just trying to get over the sticks having roses.
Yes.
But, well, at least when you say the roses had sticks, I guess that might even be strange. Isn't that a band, Sticks and Roses? No,
I tried.
Yeah, first of all, there's a lot of different ways to get treatment other than directly going to rehab, although, I definitely recommend rehab for people that are actually still
alcoholics
in the throes of addiction. Yeah.
And alcoholism, Brad.
Right, but even KLEAN as a company, we represent not just residential treatment centers, which is your traditional rehab, but we have outpatient programs, and then we also work with a series of clinicians and alumni groups around Oregon, Washington, California. We're all over the place.
Brad, I want to tell you a great story. We have a facility in Washington State. A couple months back, we did this event, and we were in Aberdeen, Washington. Okay, we were about 300-400 strong of people that we were connected with, and that's in Aberdeen.
Right.
So there is all, like Andrew's saying, it's the after, that thing you were talking about, that accountability.
Exactly.
We're all over. We were in Aberdeen.
Nice.
Okay, that's Aberdeen. And Brad, if you want help, we'll get you help tonight.
All right. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. If you're can you stay on the line?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you stay on the line? Rand is going to come talk to you for a couple seconds. And you know what, Brad? If you want the help, we're going to help you out tonight. So hold on.
Right.
And if you just tuned in, that's Brad calling from Oregon. I gave up on saying where he's from in Oregon. And Andrew, it's so... what Brad's going through, it's, you get out of rehab and you start drinking again. The courage it took for him to call in tonight.
Well, I think what other listeners might notice is that he actually sounds pretty okay.
Yeah.
And especially with alcoholism, it can be very deceiving. In fact, the better people sound sometimes, if they're addicts, the worse off they are. Because they put a lot of effort into making sure they sound okay. And also, if they're stable on a certain level of alcohol, they actually do function and feel better at that level.
And I think it's also, I had said before, and I think it's terrifying because when I got sober, I detoxed on my own, and I was detoxing from alcohol. And I didn't feel good for 2 months. And I had no idea what was going on.
Right.
I didn't know. I just thought you quit, and there were points where I almost passed out on the train. I wasn't afford the luxury of going to rehab. And I wish I had known what was going on. And it's confusing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, they talk about when they first get sober and then they look in the mirror and they don't recognize themselves.
Yeah.
And that's pretty amazing. I mean, the fact that using a substance for a period of time creates what we call a dysmorphia, where they actually don't have an idea of what they really look like. Everything's different. And as you come out of that fog, it can be really scary and create a lot of anxiety. And a lot of that is because when you're using, your ability to test what's going on in reality around you is really disturbed. And so you don't really do it well. So you start operating on your own set of myths, your own set of misconceptions about the way you look, the way people treat you, what people think about you, how you're doing at work, how well you've kept up with your bills.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
We always talk about, all the alcoholics, we know that the first thing you ask them is, where's all your mail?
Yeah, and there's always a huge pile.
Yeah.
It's
It's exactly
either
right.
in a trunk or in a drawer.
Yeah.
man.
Yeah,
One way or the
exactly,
other.
man.
Mine was my biggest fear was when I was driving and I would get pulled over. I was like, he's gonna look at my trunk. He's gonna see literally 1,000 envelopes. It was like a hoarder. That was like it wasn't even at that point I might be drunk. It was, oh my God, if he only sees my trunk.
All the mail in your trunk.
Compulsion is like hoarding, though, Judah, because what it is that you're actually trying to avoid the anxiety of what might be in that envelope.
That's it.
So, but you don't feel comfortable enough to throw it out, so you just stick it in the closet or stick it in the trunk.
Yeah, I never
and
even
hope
thought
it
about
goes
that.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a lot like it does have an anxiety disorder element to it. And some people develop even stranger types of anxiety disorders related to their addiction, like magical thinking, where they think if, they wear certain types of clothing on a certain day, they won't get in trouble. There's all sorts of
Told you not to bring
crazy
that
things
up.
yeah, right. There's strange behaviors that develop out of addiction based on what we call magical thinking. That somehow you think through magic almost that if you do certain things or think certain things or avoid certain things, that that's going to somehow stop you from the bad parts of what's going on in your life. And that leads into longer-term thought disorders and mood disorders and can be very dangerous.
I love the calls tonight, Andrew, because we've had a couple calls where they said they went to rehab and it worked, and it worked. And that's great. And then we had somebody like Brad call in who it didn't. He acknowledged why it didn't work.
Right.
And
which I thought was great.
And he's not letting it ruin his chance for getting hope.
But it didn't not work still.
Right. He's
I think
alive
there's
to
a point,
call in.
right? He's alive. We don't know where he would have been if he hadn't
Right.
gone. And he now knows what his problem is, and he still knows there's a way to deal with it.
And that's why it's so important, and I can't stress this enough. There is no magic pill. Rehab isn't a magic pill. You don't go there and miraculously you stay sober forever.
Although it somehow makes you think there's sticks with roses. But
Yes. Oh, God. Another Judaism I will not forget about. And
I want a solid reel of all these things you say. I just want to see them all in a row.
and I
Nice.
don't. And
It's going to be great.
And I know that's coming, so thank you. But I think but again, there is no magic pill, and this is a long process, and it's okay. It can be enjoyable, it could be hard, and it could be. But one of the things I like to think that we do is we always make it welcoming, and I think that's so important. I think that message that. When you come to us, you're with us for as long as you need.
Yeah.
And and Andrew, I think that's the biggest message sometimes.
Certainly one of them, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things I would like to be able to tell people that sometimes, you never get the chance to tell them. And I think that's a big part of what we've been talking about as well. I know we have that interstitial ad on the program in the middle when we go on break, where we talk about people that really care about someone that has a problem and, they don't know what to do. And I think the part of rehab is not just the person going to rehab, it's the whole family system and the system of friends.
Just so you know, last week, when we go bowling on Wednesday nights, and Andrew, via satellite, I heard you're coming bowling this Wednesday night at Pins in Studio City, 7:30 to 9:30. All sober people are welcome. People been bringing their kids.
You know what? I think I can go because I think I can beat my 31.
I know you can beat your 31. I know. But Andrew, people brought their kids.
Right.
One of the girls brought her dad. And And yeah, I got to tell you, when you look at that stuff, I go, that's pretty cool.
That is very
That's
cool.
powerful stuff when you start being able to reintegrate with people that you've largely alienated or cared about you, and you feel a lot of guilt and shame about it. So, the fact that people can then find activities to bring themselves back together in a way that isn't like, oh, you have to go to family therapy and it has to be really intense. Sometimes just spending time with people.
That's right. It could be fun.
And and I hate the word quality time, but to some degree it does describe an event where people actually take the time to listen and take the time to show that they care.
So this Wednesday night, Andrew, we got to run. You're going to be at commit, man. Commit, because you know what? People are going to come.
I'm going to come with my game, and I'm going to hit a 32.
Listen, it's progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
And even if you bowl an 18, Andrew, we still love you.
I'm going to get the ramp thing and let it roll down the ramp.
There you go.
There you go. And you know what, everybody out there, that's Pins in Studio City, 7:30. It's these people have been so generous and so kind to us. We have about 30 people there a week, and they just let us bowl and have fun. And it's really nice that so Andrew, wherever you are on satellite, we will see you in studio next week.
I will get my rocket ship.
You know what's scary? You might. And,
yeah, that's true.
Andrew, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
All right, Andrew, bye.
Bye-bye. And if you just tuned in, you are listening to Clean Radio. Buddy Totten, thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
You're one of the finest people I've ever met, and you care, and you're the best Facebooker, buddiesman ever. So if you're in trouble out there and you're in pain, and we do care, give us a call. The number is 888-601-6040. That's 888-601-6040. If you just tuned in and you're out there and you're listening, you've been listening all night, and it's getting rough, give that number a call. I promise you it will get better. Go to facebook.com/Clean Radio. Like us. Go to our blog on cleanradio.com. That's cleanradio.com with a K. Read my blog. I think I have an amazing one up there. Rand DeWitt, Patrick, Jose Olay, and Monique Moss. Discussion continues at cleanradio.com.
Are you or someone you care about addicted to drugs or alcohol? Addiction ruins lives and destroys families. Bring an end to the pain and suffering by calling KLEAN Treatment Centers. KLEAN has helped people from around the world break free by not only treating the addiction, but the underlying causes and providing vital aftercare so people can get clean and stay clean with no gimmicks and no false promises. If you need immediate assistance or just have questions, call KLEAN Treatment Centers for guidance. A much better life awaits.